All right. Well, we're going to get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is our Knowledge at Noon, our Pause, Pivot, and Prosper edition. So again, welcome everybody to this. Today, our moderator is going to be Michael Guymon. He is the Vice President at the Tucson Metro Chamber. If you have questions, I think we wanted to keep this fairly conversational, so you can always kind of raise your hand or you can put it in the chat, whatever works best. We want to kind of keep the conversation active. So again, thank you again. And Michael, go ahead and take it away.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome, like Jason said, to Pause, Pivot, and Prosper, where we're going to dive into some issues and talk to some companies that have, in our opinion, successfully paused, pivoted, and hopefully will prosper because of that. So I want to start, before I introduce everyone, we have had a series of very interesting Knowledge at Noons. We had the last 3 weeks at noon, obviously, we've had some individuals come and talk to us about various trends that are going on and even some advice during this time. So I'm going to very quickly share some information, and through this, I will also introduce our panelists. So we are pausing, we're pivoting, we're prospering. Our first one was from Dre Thompson with Startup Tucson. And she was talking about buying behavior post-COVID-19. And the interesting thing here, as you can see, e-commerce sales are up 56%, which really isn't too surprising because, well, what is everyone doing? Everyone is just kind of staying at home these days, working from home, making sure that they're being safe at home. And because of that, there are increased sales. But it's quite a dramatic increase. And so the message basically there was make sure that you are pivoting in a way that addresses that rise in e-commerce. Also seeing here that a lot of folks are purchasing from companies that feel they are doing good for society. Obviously in a time like this, it's not just the pandemic, but a lot of issues related to racial strife, to Black Lives Matter movement, and other things that are facing our world right now. Companies are pivoting to make sure that they're, kind of addressing those issues as well. Next, we had Mitch Piesick, who's actually one of our board members. He's been a CEO of numerous companies, and he's also runs a leadership consultancy right now. And he was talking about how to survive during and actually thrive after a crisis. So, be creative in your offerings. I think the interesting thing here is that be as generous and communicative as you can to your loyal customers, especially if they're hurting. So come up with things and ways that you can really reward some of your loyal customers, because you want to make sure that you certainly keep them around. And then we also had Carrie Stratford from the Caliber Group, and she talked about 7 consumer behavior trends. So you can see them there, but what's interesting here, we talked about diversity and inclusiveness. Obviously, that's a big issue that companies really need to figure out. I was on a U.S. Chamber of Commerce webinar last week that talked about companies that are implementing diversity and inclusiveness strategic plans. Doing things like that to make sure that your company is addressing those issues, not only externally, but also internally. And obviously focusing on the family, focusing on local, making sure that you have contactless engagement, which I know for some industries is difficult, but where you can do that, obviously, the health and well-being of our culture and our society is certainly important during this time. So let's go ahead and introduce our folks. I'm going to start sort of going around clockwise. So first we have Gadabout Salons, been around since 1979, started by Jana Westerbeke's mother. And Jana Westerbeke and Megan Jasper are here with us today. So thank you to you both. Really appreciate you being here. We also have Ray Flores from Flores Concepts. Everyone knows the Flores family. El Charro started in 1922. They have a variety of great concepts in food here in our community, throughout our community, in Oro Valley and Sahuarita, obviously downtown Tucson. They are all over. And Ray is also the chair of our Restaurant Advisory Council. So Ray, thank you very much for being here and for your leadership. And then lastly, we have Jeff Artzi and Lindsey Wiederstein from OOROO Auto. They started in May of 2014, and they have a very creative business, which they are also going to tell us about. But all of these great panelists are going to kind of lead a conversation in how they have successfully paused, pivoted, and hope to very much prosper. So with that, we'll start with that sort of clockwise. Our first, Jana and Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Gadabout?
So our company was founded in 1979 by my mother, and my husband and I have taken on the reins probably about 12 years ago. Megan Jasper is part of our triangle, and she fills us in, the three of us. We manage through almost everything. She's the president of operations. When this turning point happened, we had about 285 employees. I think today we're closer to 255, 260 if we're lucky. We have 7 locations, and also our corporate office that houses our educational center and our distribution center. We are a family-owned and operated business, and we have realized through this time that nothing is ever going to be the same, and it's how we lead out of this, not how we navigate through it, that is going to get us to the place that we need to be. I think before we go any further, maybe Megan has a little bit to add, but we have realized through this time that safety is the new luxury, and our services that we offer are absolutely important, but the primary feeling of our guests, our health and well-being of our staff, our employees, our teammates, and every guest experience is about the safety. And I think it's a totally different way of operating any business, and it's really taken us to a new level of thinking about our industry and how we're going to operate in the future. Is there anything you want to add?
Excellent. Thank you, Jana. So shifting over to Ray, tell us a little bit more about Flores Concepts.
Well, so everybody's familiar with the El Charro family brand. We have multiple brands that are out in the space from here all the way to Baltimore. We've had restaurants, and we had one of the first restaurants probably closed because we had Baltimore Airport closed down very early in March. So from the beginning of this, before the shutdown and whatnot, we were working with government trying to figure out a response, and there was a lot of confusion, as we know, and there still is. But I feel that in our business right now, I think we've unfortunately been leaders, because that meant that we took voluntary shutdowns right away. And then the response to that has been trying to get people, like Jana said, to understand that restaurant food is safe food. That was the biggest thing, because the narrative coming out of Washington, the narrative coming out of those who didn't know, were sort of lumping restaurants in when there was no known issue with restaurants. There hasn't been a known specific outbreak to restaurants. So we were getting kind of thrown under this massive shutdown train. And what I was worried about is restaurants provide a very unique angle, or at least pathway to food that grocery stores don't have. A lot of people that don't understand is restaurants buy food from resources that grocery stores don't. So there was this huge amount of food that was all of a sudden roadblocked. And I think when you look at the survival of all this, we can't shut down the food chain like that. I think restaurants provide a food chain solution. Not all of them, but some of them. And then, of course, you know, we've been through a lot as a family. We've been through world wars and the Great Depression and whatnot, and we have stories about what it meant to survive. And it really is. I mean, what you said about taking care of your loyal guests and responding to the community, we've turned a lot of efforts from like our Tamales for Heroes program, where we funded tamales. We gave over 5,000 tamales out in the month of March and April to the area hospitals. We fed all the first responders in Tucson, Sahuarita, around all the fire hospitals, probably 13,000 meals that went out over a month and a half's time. We did work with Tihan and the AIDS Foundation that was dealing with patients who had a hard time getting food or getting access to food. So, you know, I feel like we're as essential as it can be, even though we're typically about experience. We've converted that to more of a community-minded model.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ray. Jeff, Lindsey, tell us a little bit more about OOROO.
Yeah, so we started, as you said, Michael, in May of 2014. I had been the CEO of a company called Breakmasters, which is 90 stores in 6 states, and left there and wanted to do something different, not in terms of industry, but in terms of how we're building it from the inside out, culturally, specifically. And so we started this company, and Lindsey was employee number 1. And she's been with us since 2014. She's a co-founder of the company. And so I'll just say a few things in response to some of the things I just heard, and Lindsey might want to chime in as well. Well, first of all, let me say, Ray, I so admire, you know, your business. First of all, I've enjoyed it as a consumer. I've been to almost every restaurant you guys have in Tucson, so that's been a joy. But I had been reading over the last couple, 2-3 months about everything you and your family have been doing for Tucson, and it's a beautiful thing, and that's exactly what leadership is all about. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. You know, something Jana said was interesting, because we consider ourselves to be in the safety business. We always say that. We're here to take care of human beings in their vehicles, and we do not think about vehicles as steel and rubber per se. We think of them as human transport machines. So we think about the human beings that are in the car seats that are in the back seat, the families that are driving, and we always think about safety first. And so, you know, this has been an interesting time, because safety has come to mean something slightly different, or very different these days. It's about health and wellness and taking care of ourselves. And I know we'll get into some of this other about pivoting and such, but you know, well, a few things. First of all, I think we were sort of geared up and ready for this type of a thing, not having ever predicted such a catastrophe, such a pandemic. But our business model serves customers in a way that they happen to be geared for right now, and sort of their mindset is there right now. And we've also had to pivot to some degree within our business to make it more attractive, and actually to do things that are sort of push the envelope and try new things. So, and we'll get into some of that stuff later, but you know, these kind of shocking economic changes forced companies to think differently. I was the CEO of Breakmasters exactly during the Great Recession, and we had to think about how to adjust our business during that time as well. So anyway, that's my first thoughts on the subject.
Lindsey, do you have anything to add?
No, not right now.
Okay. So obviously safety is a big theme here. Whether it's safety of customers, safety of food, safety of drivers, safety is obviously huge, but let's kind of go to that pivot, Jeff. You know, through this pandemic, your industries have been affected in different ways. In the initial shutdown by the governor, the auto industry and maintenance was considered an essential service, so you were allowed to stay open. Salons and restaurants were more dramatically affected. Salons had to close. Restaurants basically had to shift to takeout only. So maybe starting with you, Jeff, to kind of continue on your theme, since you were allowed to remain open, what was what caused you to kind of decide that you needed to pivot?
Yeah, so the shop itself, I have to say, there were only 2 days in the last 3 to 4 months where we were concerned, where it was crickets. But the shop itself has been steady throughout. The business I'm referring to is as Lindsey noted, is we're in the mobile business as well. So we go out and we provide automotive repair and maintenance to employees at their place of business and at their homes. And so our primary target was client partners, meaning employers, and providing this service as a perk, a free perk to the company, but a perk to their employees at their workplace, at their office. And so, of course, these times have required us to shift that around and offer the services at folks' people's homes. And in some ways, I have to say it's been better because some of the logistics that are involved in working, in doing our work at a workplace have been removed because the transaction is actually between the vehicle owner and us, not the company anyway. So now we're doing the work on their property. But it required, a different kind of marketing. We had to reach out to our client partners and remind them that this was this is an important perk for them, and some client partners responded really well. Some of them were sort of like scrambling to deal with their own stuff right now, and were sort of turned off. Couldn't deal with this auto repair and maintenance. In fact, it's funny. I reached out to a potential client partner this morning. Because she had responded to us and said, you know what, at this time, we're not interested in these services. And my response back was, in these services, your employees are going to get car repair done from now, next week, the month after, is anybody going to get an oil change? How about AC not blowing cold? Brake jobs, whatever it might be. So, there's this, what we've noticed is that, the client partners who we've already formed relationships with and we have strong relationships with have worked with us in that pivot. And there are some client partners, especially the ones who are not yet client partners, who are just prospects, who are just overwhelmed with so many other things that they just can't see this as something that they want to add on to their plate right now. And that's been a challenge for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. Lindsey might want to talk about, how we've pivoted in our business development, which has been actually, I would say, a plus. We've created a way that actually is better and scalable and more efficient than it had been before. I don't know if you want to hear about that, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can speak to it briefly. I think it's kind of the other side of the coin. So having to pivot in terms of offering services for consumers at their homes, like Jeff had said, has been good in some senses for us. The other side of that has been, how do we forge relationships with new clients, and sort of speak to how that our service can really benefit their employees moving forward, especially through these times right now because of the way we provide the mobile service. So we like Jeff said, we had to completely kind of change our process now for approaching potential clients. Doesn't look at all how it looked 3-4 months ago. Right. So we're doing most things virtually, like many people are these days, reaching out through LinkedIn, email. The way we're approaching those relationships look different, and in some ways, people are geared towards that now, and so it's it's the way that most people are operating. And so we're sort of leaning into that and saying, okay, this is how people are probably going to continue to interact with each other for the most part, you know, for the foreseeable future. So really, really embracing that and seeing how we can, you know, leverage it. So
it's much easier to get somebody to join a Zoom call and to meet us for the first time in a Zoom call where we can actually do a presentation, a screen share, and go through the whole presentation, rather than, and we know because we did this before COVID, is, you know, trying to get on their calendar. Oh, then we have to cancel and reschedule because their schedule didn't work out. You know, we don't have the kind of slick presentation as we do in a Zoom call. So it's a little bit, it's the physical collateral, you know, the stuff we leave behind. It wasn't nearly as efficient and scalable and frankly informative as I think it is now. So that was a pivot that actually is to the positive.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, that's a great example. So Jana, Megan, and Ray, again, you know, your industries were affected pretty dramatically by the shutdown initially. So that that almost forced you to pivot. But what are maybe some other things that you've thought of outside of the shutdown that you have moved forward with? I know, Ray, you've talked a lot about the things that you're doing in the community, and I do want to echo Jeff and thank you for doing all that. I know Gadabout has also been a great community partner since 1979, providing a lot of great services, being very philanthropic. But you know, outside of the shutdown, what have you done in terms of pivoting?
I'll let Jana go first, if that's okay.
Well, I'm just hearing what was the one thing that really stands out. We are in the human being business, and we are of high touch, not virtual touch. So we can't perform our services like this, and the expectations of the current consumer and how we've had to adapt to that is crazy. You know, I was showing everybody earlier that we let them know we're smiling over our masks. We've just really had to develop new ideas on how our consumer can trust us and feel safe and sit in our chairs and lay on our tables and not be able to communicate the way they ever have before. So I think everything that we've been working on is really how do we touch our consumer today differently with the value, and our consumers they blow me away at their responses. They say, I have never felt like my individual service has ever been so, it's like the best ever, because our staff are focused on one person at a time, like never before. We used to have people filling in the books in between and servicing as many as we can. And now we're looking at alternative ways on how we can service the guests and maximize, to minimize. It's been very enlightening for us because it's actually opened our doors and our opportunities to do business like we never have before. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say for us, being a 40-year young business, this year has opened up all the opportunities for us to dig deep into the business and make the changes we were scared along the way to make, or that were too big or too hefty, right? You know, I think about technology and I think about software and I think about what that does to a business. And at this point, we don't have the opportunity or the luxury to wait around for the software that we currently have to like improve. We're going to have to make the changes and buy into the future of whatever that is. And so our pivot, I would say, has been not to do it the way we've always done it because it was easy and we were profitable and we just didn't have to make changes. And now we have to look at every aspect of our business and how do we get more efficient? How do we get better equipped in touching our consumer both virtually and through technology? And what is that going to look like for us? So it's like uncovering all the hard conversations that you just kind of always want.
Thank you, Ray.
Well, so one of the things we did was, and to try and handle the no touches, we had mostly full service restaurants, as you know. We do have some fast casual applications in some of the airports that we have around the country, which have been, unfortunately, even though they're fast casual, been shut down. We opened a restaurant in Kentucky. I haven't even been there yet. I haven't seen it. So it's weird to be opening something and doing everything over Facebook Live, over a video chat. We had to train people and check food out. It's just nuts, you know. And I mean, I've never even seen it, and it's open now and running and buying food from our commissary here in Tucson. But we've gone to online ordering. We've quickly moved to that. We've gone to now no touch payment. We've opened 2 out of the 7 units in Tucson or Southern Arizona. We haven't opened up the others yet. Some just don't transfer well for this. You know, Charro Steak and Del Rey, seafood and steak, that doesn't transfer well to a takeout model. El Charro's always done a lot of business in catering and is used to doing work in concessions and stadiums and weird applications. So it moved pretty quickly and easily to this world that we're dealing with now. The store at Ventana up at Colburn Sunrise, it was the first one to reopen to dining room. We installed a lot of technology including UV lighting systems and all this, you know, different ozone cleaners and whatever have you in that store. We're installing them everywhere else. They're ready to go. But we've been walking on this because, again, the goalpost keeps moving. We know that. But in the meantime, we wanted to get things to be sold online. So this has actually given us some time. So we launched Tamale of the Month, which was a thought of 2 years ago. We just never got around to it. And we finally launched. So we have a subscription service that now you can buy tamales and subscribe to them, and we send you a box every month, and they're FedEx. And now we've got people buying them all around the country. That gave birth to Tamales for Heroes, which we want to now convert to a national model where people could actually buy tamales and send to their favorite, you know, either first responder group, hospital, nonprofit, or other. We've shifted into other industries. I've come from a different background. I've had marketing and other companies in my background, and I've had a couple medical startups that I've done. And I just started a company called crewtesting.com, where we're actually partnering up with area labs and lab providers as sort of the Expedia of lab testing for crew members. So for instance, Jana, you could log into my website, find out, you know, buy a certain amount of tests as needed, send your people through a testing portal, get the information back you need. Plus we give you a sticker or something put on your door that says you're actively testing people, right? That, you know, if you remember back in the day when we used to go to like Manhattan Beach, or you go to California and you'd see the A's and the B's on the restaurant windows, and you think, well, I'm going to stand in line at the one with the A because I'm just that, you know, I like the A over the B. We thought that when we started crew testing, it would be cool that if people knew, hey, look, this is a business that actively is testing their employees, that it would be better than the one who didn't. So we've started this company called Crew Testing. We're in the middle of developing more and more technology behind that, as well as structure, because again, the testing has moved. So we're working with a lab here in Arizona, we're working with a lab in Colorado, a lab in North Carolina, and a lab in Texas. And we're trying to figure out what is going to be the benchmark for ease of testing for people to get back to work safely. You know, you're not going to be able to do a PCR test on a 6-year-old's nose very easily. I mean, it's very painful. It's stressful for a parent to try and stick that thing in a kid's nose. So we're looking at other types of tests. Some of the ones that came out initially that were released in Tucson were not good tests. So I've spent a lot of my time learning more about the background of what this will be, because it's not good enough for me to just depend on a third party. I had to get in the game. I've got too much at stake and too much of a reputation of my brands and what our family means in this town and what we want to do to just be a bystander to it. So I did. I forced a team of people. I've got the top COVID doctor in town as one of my partners on this. And we're learning about it every day, because it can't be just left up to science, right? We can't leave the economy up just to scientists, and we can't leave the science up to the economy. It's got to be a marriage of both worlds to get back to something that we can all have for the future of our children, or their generations, et cetera. Because right now it's very divisive, as we know. I mean, nobody ever called me and said, hey, Ray, we're going to shut down restaurants. What do you think? I was the one who reached out to the county. I was the one who reached out to the city. I had a USDA inspector in my, because we have a USDA company here. We're one of the few that does USDA. And I had asked them in February, hey guys, there's this thing going on in New York. You know, obviously you've got USDA plants there. What are you doing? And they didn't know. They basically were like, well, Ray, just run your HACCP plan. Everything's going to be fine. I'm like, well, I know, but are you guys going to do anything about this? Am I going to have to add new things into the plant operation? Can I get ahead of this? No, everything's fine. You're no problem. And then the same thing, I would call the city council. I would call the Pima County Health Department. No, we don't have an outbreak. Nothing, everything's fine. We went to a meeting on March 15th or 16th, the day before St. Patrick's Day, whatever it was. And when I left that meeting, they weren't going to do anything. They were just like, well, look, just tell older people that they shouldn't come, you know, eat at your restaurant. I'm like, wait, what? I mean, this is from one of the heads of the department. And I'm like, I can't do that. This is not, it's, you know, you may think it's all about this liability or other. I also think about it from, if I've got a Starbucks in my parking lot and they're shutting down their dining rooms, how am I not supposed to? What does that tell my customers? And we knew Starbucks was coming because we have a unit in Phoenix right next to a Starbucks that was already getting ready to shut down. So I was like, God, we got to respond to this in a different way. We can't be reactive. And so anyway, we've moved some models to online. We're looking at more online business. We're looking at a lot of no touch. We've done a lot of that, but we also have to be very involved with what's going on from the political side, the administration side, the science of all this, because you will not be able to make a well-rounded decision if you're not aware of it. The idea, for instance, right now, and this is a critical one, and it applies for all of us. And I just read an article, and I asked this of the Pima County Health Department. Please come out with some kind of doctrine that if a business, specifically, of course, I'm thinking of restaurants because that's what I'm in, has a quote unquote outbreak, which is a very bad word, because an outbreak you would think requires multiple, you know, exposure issues, right? But one person comes in and says, hey, look, I was at a party and, you know, this buddy of mine tested. What do I do? What does a restaurant manager do? What does a restaurant do? Right now, we saw Desert Diamond close down. We've seen Barrio Brewery close down. We've seen big brands in town close down over what was supposedly one person who might have had COVID coming to work. Guess what? That's going to happen for a very long time, for many, many millions of incidences all around this country. Are we just going to shut things down here and there every now and then? No, there's not a reason to shut them down. There's a reason to have some protocols in place, some best practices, get people retested, come back, you know, quarantine those people away, validate where they were, but most importantly, wear masks. Now, I have 100% my own empirical experience and studies of this where masks work. I've had 2 people be around me within close proximity for extended periods of time who tested positive, and everybody around them that was wearing masks, and because they were wearing masks, nobody tested positive. And we did multiple tests. We paid for it. We didn't wait, and we came back clean. Everybody. Now, the people that they were at the party with the week before, everyone got it. No mask, no respect for that. And again, not out of disrespect, but probably just out of not knowing, no mask, and they got it. And honestly, most of them, no symptoms. That's what's scary, right? No symptoms at all. No fever, no nothing. And I keep saying to people, watch the fevers, but really watch when you have a loss of taste or smell, because the only other thing that causes that is brain symmetry. And then you would know if you have brain symmetry, right? It's like, you know, it's like that scene in My Cousin Vinny where she's like, you would know the difference between a Corvette and a Skylark. You know, I mean, if you have, you know, there's your car reference. So, you know, if you had brain symmetry, you know, and if you have a loss of taste or smell, you probably have COVID. So we're trying to educate people on the ground. You know, they don't know, they don't get time to read a lot. But I get a lot of the questions like, well, my wife works at a doctor's office as a receptionist, and one of the nurses, and I mean, well, okay, did she test positive? Well, no. Okay, well, if you want to, get her tested. If she doesn't, it doesn't jump over people. It's not, you know, it's not a grasshopper. If she doesn't have it, you're not going to have it. And I think we really have to all, as business owners, also become a bit clinical in this, because the information channels are just so fraught with misinformation. Facebook is literally like a dangerous time bomb every time I look at it. So all I've been trying to do is champion the intelligence of it. You know, look at the case studies of what happened in Hong Kong and Taiwan, right next to the epicenter of Wuhan and they didn't get it as bad because they were already culturally biased to wearing masks. It wasn't a political thing for them. This is just how they live their lives. So, you know,
Yeah.
I think the balance of all that is where we have to be.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Jana. So, by the way, I want to kind of open it up too for folks that are with us that are not on the panel. If you do have questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure that it gets asked. But I was just curious, you know, Ray, you mentioned increasing online. Lindsey, you talked about things that you're doing with LinkedIn and other avenues. Megan, you talked about using technology more. You know, with the stat that I flashed up during the presentation about how e-commerce is increasing by 56% during this time. You know, can you talk about some ways that you are using some of these new technological advances to promote the business in a way that you're, you know, pivoting towards prospering?
Yeah, we can start if you'd like.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, just like others on the call, auto repair is not a widget that you can buy online. So we continue to provide, it's very much an in-person service, whichever way, you know, you're utilizing it. But the idea of no contact, as Ray was talking about, and as I think was on one of the slides you shared, Michael, that's become a priority in the shop and with mobile. So, you know, we've got special protocols in place at the shop to help maintain that basically minimal contact or no contact. So practically ground level for our shop, that means that people are no longer waiting in our lobby for their cars to be serviced. So we've got a shuttle driver who's driving every single customer home so that they can wait, you know, outside of our physical building. But when it comes to the mobile service, just because of the nature of the way it's provided, that part of our business has definitely been more geared towards the use of technology. So we do have an app that you can download, you know, on your phone, that you can basically create a profile and put in your vehicle information, and then you can schedule appointments online, pay for service, you know, things like that. So that's all can be, you know, no contact, and that's the way we've been providing the mobile service, you know, for right now. Many people are really comfortable with picking up the phone and calling us, but we also have a lot of people who are using that app and getting service that way.
Yeah, I think the mobile has been very interesting. I mean, this is our second year doing the mobile services. And, you know, we originally said it was for busy lifestyles. So, you know, people are at work, they don't have time to go to the automotive shop on the weekends and whenever they were going. And they don't want to sit there in the lobby and all that. So we said it was a lifestyle issue. Now it's a lifestyle issue for a different reason. And you know, we've changed a bit of our language and our marketing but even like I was talking about earlier, and Lindsey mentioned as well about, you know, these virtual meetings we're having with our points of contact, our HR directors, CFOs, CEOs, et cetera. That too, obviously that's contactless. And it's been, like I said earlier, you know, very efficient, and seems to be preferable. I mean, I'm having more meetings period now because of Zoom than I've ever had before in a day. I mean, you know, sometimes 4, you know, Zoom meetings, sometimes in a row. So I feel like I can get a lot more done. And, you know, when you're, you know, we call what we're doing B2B to C and that side of our business, because we're B2B in the sense we're dealing with, you know, a gatekeeper, so to speak, for a company who is giving us access to their employees, who's the ultimate consumer. So the more things we can do that are contactless and virtual and efficient, the better off we're going to be in the long run. And, you know, our big, hairy, audacious goal, as they say, is to not just be in Tucson. We want to grow into Phoenix by the end of this year, and then be a regional player in what we call hub and spoke, which is having these shops as the hubs and having the mobile services as the spokes coming off of them. And so, you know, all of that lends everything we just talked about, this pivot, if you will, lends itself better to scale than having a whole operation in each of these markets. So I also want to say, just to stick this in here, I have been a client of Gadabout since 1993. I used to go to Lee on Grant and then Tina Knight on Grant. And now I go to Anna Marie on Sunrise and Colt. So I've been a client. It looks good, right? You like it?
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, now we're pausing, pivoting, and, you know, getting fashion advice.
Yes, exactly.
So you know, I kind of say this as a joke, but Jana and Megan, I mean, we're talking about technology. Maybe Gadabout can develop an app that takes the OOROO model and you put your stylist on the road and do house calls. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm sure there were a lot of house calls happening while we were shut down, but we didn't really talk about that face to face. Megan's the technology expert. I'm going to let her speak to that.
We've definitely talked about what it is to do Gadabout to go or Gadabout on the go, and there's always those hitches that come up. So like our technicians not feeling comfortable going into somebody else's house. So we've got a little work to do on that. But I would say, for going back to the conversation on online and retail, we had, by the grace of God, launched a brand new website like 3 months before COVID. And we had developed our online store. We had delivery options. We were partnered with Postmates or whatever it was for delivery, same day. And it truly is what helped us be relevant during the time that we were closed, where our guests could support their technician. They could still buy retail. We gave 10% of all the retail sales directly to their service provider and then 10% into an employee hardship fund. So we were able to promote and market the opportunity for the guests to still stay connected and be in that relationship even though we were closed. I really just think that the technology and the more we can utilize it to put the service in the guest's hands is so important. Restaurants have been doing it forever with being able to book your reservation online. Gadabout, by the end of this year, you'll be able to book your own appointment online. So I just think that using technology and embracing it is how we're going to move forward in 2021.
I just want to add something, which is something I just thought of here. You know, Ray and Jana and Megan and our business, it's really interesting. I like the idea, obviously I like the idea of pushing services out to where people are. I always liked that. In fact, I had a friend who used to own a chain of smoothie stores in Tucson. And I always said to him, why are you waiting for somebody to come to your store in a strip mall? Push it out, have, food, a food truck, and go to the employers and people will buy their smoothies and their juices and everything on property. So I love the idea of not waiting. And we three businesses, we're in the retail business, every one of us, right? And so the one thing I don't like about the retail business is in some sense, it's not a proactive, it's a reactive type of a situation, which is why I like mobile, because we're pushing it out, we're visible out. We've had a number of people where we're driving through neighborhoods. If we don't have an appointment, our technicians are instructed to drive slowly through neighborhoods and through corporate parks so that people see us. And we got calls at the shop during the height of, let's say March and April, and they said, we didn't even know you were open. We didn't know that you were an essential business. And so we got work at the shop because of the mobile. But the other side of that coin, and I think this is going to be fascinating to see, just as companies are going to struggle, I think, culturally, because their employees are not in the same place. So all those cool foosball tables and all the, paying for lunches and all those things that companies or companies that are with it, so to speak, do and do well, that goes away, right? When everybody's dispersed. The other side of that is, as retail businesses, the customer doesn't get a chance to experience us and our culture and our vibe and the brand. It doesn't get to feel, touch, smell the brand. So, you know, I don't have an answer. I'm just bringing up this conundrum that I think we're going to be dealing with, which is, I think people are going to feel more comfortable doing things remotely at their home or, you know, in remote work sites, workplaces. It's going to be a challenge to get them to feel our brand and allow us to distinguish ourselves in the marketplace. Because when you go into a Gadabout or you go into a Flores restaurant, there's a vibe, there's a feel, there's a, you know, you can blindfold somebody and put them in the middle of the restaurant, take off, you know, all the branding, all the identifying branding, and you'll know you're in a Flores restaurant or a Gadabout. And I hope that would be the case here too. Very interesting to see what happens as that gets pulled apart to some degree, and people have preferences to do things remotely.
I think that's a great point of view. And I can't imagine what it's like for any other business but mine to try and figure out how to get to that mobile point of view. But we are working, for instance, right now on a concept that's going to be more like a Mexican market. And we have a spot already that we had leased before COVID. That was going to be something else. And then that changed, but we've now re-engineered the concept to be more of a fast casual Mexican market, heavy focus on delivery. I mean, the delivery models for our industry are really brutal because they cut so much into your, you know, Grubhub and those guys are not doing anybody any favors. They're very greedy with their processes. So we'll be working on our own delivery, but our own pickup models, et cetera. But I do think that more pop-up, more service-minded things that can bring your product to people is a great idea. You know, and then there's also the fact though that at some point people are going to snap. I mean, we know there's, you know, if you've got, like I have, and I talked to my sister today who we own the Stillwell house, her and I, the wedding venue, and we've been decimated by it. I mean, there's no weddings, and now there can't be weddings over X amount of people. So we've just had tons and tons of cancellations. But at the same time, we also have those people coming in right now that don't care. And we get this conflict where they don't care about the COVID rules or the COVID fear, and they're just living like it doesn't exist. Somewhat admirable to a sense, somewhat very concerning to a sense, but nobody wants to come back to work right now, and that's a challenge. And I've even talked to Candace about doing like drive-up weddings and all the kind of things you've seen on the news about how we could motivate that. And you know, maybe there's going to have to be cooperations like ours, you know, with ourselves and Gadabouts, and to start to deliver an idea that people can get back to some, I hate the word normalcy now because it's used so much, but we've got to get something back to where we're not destined to be hermits. Because I have young children. It's very difficult right now to go to a Little League practice and watch them, what they have to do, or you get yelled at because they're not 6 feet apart from each other, or
Very sad.
That's really tough. And I don't know, where does it break? It's going to have to be a breaking point. You know, I keep telling people, pray for Brazil, because Brazil's testing a vaccine right now. And, you know, let's pray that Brazil works. Anyway.
All right. So I do want to address this because, you know, it's come up a lot in conversations. As I mentioned, I attended a U.S. Chamber of Commerce webinar about diversity and inclusiveness. And, you know, this is one of the things that I think companies have had to pause and pivot on as well. And that is being mindful of diversity and inclusiveness. So I'm curious as to what your companies have done in regard to this issue.
I'll take it. If that's okay. I would say I am so proud to be able to say we're completely colorblind, we're completely race blind, gender blind. It's all about is this person going to fit into our corporate culture? That's what we're mainly concerned. Of course, are they skilled? Sure, but we've hired people who are less skilled than the job requires, and we've trained them to do the job. But is this person going to fit into, as I always say, culture is a sensitive ecosystem. You've got to be really careful who you invite into the koi pond, because it gets contaminated very, very easily. And so we're really careful about who and how we hire. And there have been people in our company who the culture has rejected completely, but it had nothing to do with ever, diverse, race or creed or any such thing, gender or anything like that. So, yeah. Lindsey, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Do you?
I guess the only thing I'd add, I wouldn't say that this is, to Jeff's point about culture fit is like the number one thing that we think about when we're talking about hiring. So I wouldn't say that the automotive industry in general is not incredibly diverse in the sense that it tends to be a male dominated industry. And I guess, I'm proud to say that OOROO has a diversity of gender, age, ethnicity. And to Jeff's point, it's all because we're more focused on culture above everything else. But yeah, it hasn't been necessarily a specific diversity policy, but I feel very thankful to work for a company where I can look at the people who work there and say, this is a diverse group of people who bring, different perspectives and experiences to the table. And we've hired people that don't have automotive background. To Jeff's point, we hired them because we felt like they were going to be really good for the company, and we've been able to train them up and have them be successful in the industry. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd add.
Thank you. Jana, I think looked like you had a comment.
No, I just feel like we've always been really inclusive instead of exclusive. And we are a predominant female run business. Probably 98% of our employees are female. My husband loves that. I feel like, and that's probably what you shouldn't say in these day and age, but he's really in tune with his feminine side, which is a great thing because he communicates well. But I think as we navigate through what's ahead of us, our goal is we're hiring differently. We used to expect you to come with a license, and then we would train you and educate you. And now we're to the place where we are thinking about taking people from other brands, people that come to us and say, I have a guest list, I want to come work for you. So it's a different kind of mindset about how we're trying to be more inclusive to everyone. And we don't really necessarily know the direction of the future. So we're going to look at everything as being possible, because I don't know what other things that we've done that the inclusiveness is.
Ray, do you have a comment on that?
Well, as you know, our family stores downtown were vandalized during the protests march. We have it on firsthand experience or knowledge that when some of the people threw the rocks or bricks or whatever they threw through the windows, that there was somebody in the crowd who knew our family and was like, hey, look, they're Hispanic owned, they're local, don't do that. And the response was, we don't care, they have insurance. I think there's a sort of a vilifying of businesses in general right now, that all businesses are bad. And I think that's an issue that, small business leadership groups and other civic minded groups need to figure out how to address, because I think if you pay somebody, you're automatically put in this position of that you own them. And I've had people tell me that before, and Jana, you guys can tell me because you've employed so many people. I've had people say, this is Ray, he's our owner, he's my owner. And I've always been like, I don't own you. Like, I'm not an owner. In fact, I don't own any of this because I'm in debt up to my ass. So, I don't know what you're talking about, who owns what anymore. I think there's one, there's probably one owner of all of it. So I think that unfortunately, businesses and business leaders have a very hard time right now and are almost forced to be mute. And even like, for instance, I have friends that are Black and that are leaders, and they're afraid to say something. And then I have friends that are Hispanic and they're women, and they're afraid to say something. And it's you just don't know what to say right now because it can be twisted so easily. Even if, for instance, I tend to type in all caps a lot. Like, I'm always in a hurry, and I don't type like text in like proper sentence format because it's just easier for me to type quickly. And so the other day I remember I was on a phone call or one of these Zoom deals, and I typed something in all caps, and right away the people on the call accused me that I was yelling at them and that I was doing disrespectful. And I'm like, that's how I always, and maybe I always yell too. I don't know. I mean, but they were so sensitive to, and I had to apologize to them. And I'm like, and I felt shamed into this position where I was trying to make a very important point that was more important than the points they were making, in that I was the one who had the experience and they were talking about me. And then when I responded, I was incorrect in doing it in all caps. It's an extremely sensitive situation. I mean, they could turn around and say right now, sorry, I got the call coming in. They could say to any of us right now that just by the comment, for instance, that you made about, that I don't see color, that could be by some standards, that could be a negative. And that's not fair. It's not fair to you. And it's not fair to the point you're trying to make. I've always, whether it's, the fact is, we had to be responsive to the Me Too movement, which is extremely critical. I've grown up in a family-owned business that's been run by women. Monica Flynn started El Charo. My mom's run it forever. I've always worked with a female boss, or if you want to call it that. I don't see it either, but I don't also want to say that because you have to be so careful nowadays. I do believe that at some point we have to figure out how we're going to get past this to actually get a solution versus just tearing things down. And that's what's going on right now. Tearing things down seems to be part of the solution, but it's really not. I don't believe that it's going to work in the end. I believe we're putting people further apart on islands they won't be able to jump across. And that's an unfortunate part to this situation. I don't know how we rebound from this. Like COVID is obviously the biggest issue for me right now in my life because I'm extremely afraid of it. I'm afraid of it personally. I have had cancer before. I have a lung that doesn't work perfectly on the left side. I don't want COVID. But I also don't like this issue with the social injustice and the risk to our fabric of our country that is already there and getting worse. So how do you deal with that as a business owner? All you do is, just because you're a business owner, you're supposed to have these solutions. All we do is handle payroll. I don't know that we know anything more than that than somebody else who works for us. It's a very messy, sticky situation. I think that people have to pick up the phone more and talk and stay off the line so much. I think that would be helpful, but it's tough because people are on islands. We had a group that donated to a GoFundMe account for our family when they broke all the windows. A former DJ who actually worked for me at Cervezas, had nothing to do with El Charo, but was impacted by it. And he decided he was going to start a GoFundMe account, and he raised money to help us fix our windows. It was really cool, very kind. A lot of people gave because it was like $20 amounts, $10 amounts. He ended up raising exactly $2,020, which was rather odd, right? I mean, he exactly nailed it on $2,020. I didn't want the money. In fact, BLM contributed to the fund, and that was great. But I had said to him, and I said to BLM, well, what if we use the money to buy to pay for a dinner, and we brought people together from the community, and I fed them so that we could talk about the community's challenges. And right away, one of the groups said, we're not participating in that because they're going to be at the table. And I'm like, well, that blew that idea. So they're not willing to move off their island now. How does a business who wants to do business on all those islands behave properly so they don't get shunned or don't get disregarded or don't get put in a box. Because all we're trying to do is keep people moving and create cash flow to pay people to do what we're supposed to do. And we're stuck on these islands now. It's very, very difficult.
Well, I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's a little after 1. We've gone a little past our normal time allotment. I do want to say, you know, the Chamber, we are willing to have some of those conversations. We think it's important to have some of those conversations. But, you know, I also really appreciate everyone's time. Megan, Jana, Jeff, Lindsey, Ray, thank you so much for being here. I know that at the core of business, it is business's job to make a profit, but it's also a business's job to be creative in how you need to at times shift to make sure that you continue to make a profit. And I think all of you have exemplified what that shift looks like and how you have successfully pivoted your businesses so that you continue to prosper. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And I'll turn it, thank you for having me moderate this. I appreciate it. I always have fun with it. But I'll turn it over to Jason now for some closing comments.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you for moderating today's Pause, Pivot, and Prosper. Again, thank you to Ray, Megan, Janet, Jeff, and Lindsey for your time and really, really great meetings. We really appreciate it. Very informative. Just want to let you stay tuned. We're working on some other Knowledge at Noons for the next month. Nothing on the calendar right as of yet, but we're still working on some. So please watch our website and the emails. And again, thank you to everyone. Be safe. Have a very happy and safe 4th of July coming up. And again,
you too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Best of luck. Stay safe, everyone.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See ya.
Okay.